Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Alertus webinar series. My name is Sharice Ruan, Marketing Specialist at Alertus Technologies. During this presentation, Ben Brewer, Chief Information Security Officer and Senior Director of Professional Services, will provide insight on Alertus two-way radio integration solution and how you can easily integrate this technology for comprehensive emergency notification. Feel free to submit your questions during the webinar at any time, and they will be addressed during the Q&A session at the end of this presentation. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared with you after today's session. If you have any questions after this presentation, please email marketing@alertus.com. Now I'd like to turn it over to Ben.
Well, good day, everybody. And Sharice, thank you for that warm introduction. As Sharice indicated, today we're here to talk to you about our two-way integration. It is far and away one of my favorite integrations to speak to. My background is primarily in emergency management, supporting crisis communications for the past 35 plus years. And in my time as an operator, while you are taking a look at the agenda screen here, what I noticed over the years was that, crisis situations are very fluid, they're very dynamic, and sometimes they're very, very volatile and fast-paced. Things change, and oftentimes, as you're engaging the crisis communication cycle, something new will come in and you have to re-engage from the starting point all over again. And in my experience, the ability to disseminate alerts and notifications over the radio systems, because it was a disparate communication system and not tied into anything, it was typically a little bit lower down the priority list. And sometimes in these highly volatile and fluid situations, we, simply put, never ever got to getting the word out over the radio until very late in the game. Oftentimes, especially in today's environment, those individuals that we really need to truly communicate with in a timely and efficient manner, they could be, potentially placed in harm's way. So as my career matured over the years and I found myself overseeing emergency notification for the Air Force, I was looking for ways to unify all of our communication structures, because we had a dedicated crisis communications team and they had to hop from one system to the other in order to efficiently complete all of their required activities, within a quick response checklist or a response plan. And again, radios being what they were, sometimes you got to them, sometimes you didn't. So it became a very high priority for me. And when I stepped away from the Air Force in 2008 and came into the commercial sector working with emergency notification system providers, that was one of the integrations that I was very hot to see enabled. And as I transitioned over to Alertus 5 years ago, I had the opportunity to work with some experts in the field. And here we are today talking about radio integration, which we've been able to provide for about the past 4 years. So with that being said about my background and my interest in two-way radio integration, we thought we would start off by talking with you a little bit about Alertus Technologies, who we are and what we do. Alertus Technologies really focuses on unified mass notification solutions. We've been in business for approximately 15 years. The company was established back in 2002 in the wake of a disaster up at the University of Maryland. A tornado had touched down on the campus, and sadly, a couple of students lost their lives. But what was noted out of that entire incident was the lack of warning. And from that incident, Alertus was born. Fast forward to 2018, we have more than 2,000 customers around the globe. And even though our humble beginnings were in the higher education sector, we now serve all sectors, whether they be industrial, corporate, financial, healthcare, education, government, or the military. And we're happy to do so. What you see represented up on the screen, with regard to how you send an alert, on the left side of the screen are some of the wonderful threats that we find ourselves facing in today's world, whether they be natural, man-made, or technological. And I do like to differentiate those last two because they do have varied impacts, and it seems to me that the man-made disasters typically have far more life safety implications than some of the more technological ones, such as cyber threats that we face today. But our organizations are so dynamic and so diverse in the 21st century as compared to back in, the early 1980s when I got my start in crisis communication. Some of the challenges that we have to face in regard to issuing a timely notification are on the right side of the screen. And the ones that I would opt to focus on as you kind of peruse that list are the ones that are associated with facilities, the diversity, being geographically separated, whether it be within the same state, within the same region, across the country, or perhaps even around the globe, and really focusing on the employees. Because one of the things that we see in the 21st century is that our workforce is highly mobile and it's highly transient at the same time. The difference being technologies have really enabled employee mobility. We have the ability to work from virtually anywhere on the face of the globe. So our technologies are enabling that mobility. At the same time, while back in the 1970s, 80s, most of us that were joining the workforce, we expected the company that we went to work for, out of high school, out of college, was likely going to be the company that we retired with. In the 21st century, that is really not the paradigm that's in place these days, wherein we have a highly transient workforce moving from one organization to the other. And not only does it keep that individual's breadth of experience ever growing, but it also helps organizations, as we found as well, because you're bringing in new ideas and, just trying to stay fresh with the churn that transient nature of the workforce is providing. And I focus on that because one of the things that we notice in personal notification systems, which deal in generating phone calls, SMS, and email alerts, is that they're highly dependent, obviously, on the accuracy of that contact database. And the transient nature and the volatile nature of our workforce, that makes it an increasingly cumbersome challenge to keep up with. So the strength of the Alertus notification system in unifying all of your notification modalities really helps to mitigate, if you will, the gap in the contact database, because we do seek to saturate your physical space and leverage your IP infrastructure, as well as your other capital investments that you have made in your communications infrastructure, to make sure that we have the opportunity to touch everybody that is moving within your organization on a given day that might be impacted by an incident. So ultimately, when you look down at that bottom bullet with regard to how long does it take, through unified mass notification, we're seeking to minimize the time that it takes to activate a comprehensive all-modality alert, so that way your operators can maintain situational awareness and remain responsive to the incident as the incident continues to evolve. Our goal is to reach everyone everywhere within your enterprise. And I say enterprise because it's not necessarily associated with your facility, because you could have employees out and traveling or out on the grounds. What you see represented on the right side of the screen in the smaller spheres are diverse or non-unified, if you will, notification modalities. They could be standalone communication systems, such as your overhead public address system, your email system, fire alarm panels, and all of the endpoints that are associated with that system, outdoor sirens and speakers, things of that nature. Each of those comes with a challenge, because most times they're approaching notification from a sole perspective, and they might not be able to provide the comprehensive coverage that you're looking for. The red circle in encapsulating all of those smaller spheres represents the unification that you can achieve through the Alertus notification system. And what you achieve, what you gain in unifying all of your various communications modalities is that true single point of activation. It provides you with multimodal notification simultaneously without having to have your personnel go from one system to the next to achieve the desired effect. Provides both audio and visual notification, so that you're not only addressing all of the people that are moving through your space, but you're also providing the opportunity for individuals that are perhaps sight or hearing impaired to consume that alert and take protective action as well. And our favorite thing at Alertus, we always seek to leverage the capital investments that you all have made in your existing infrastructure. And that helps achieve an economy of scale, a lot of efficiencies on your end, and ultimately brings the system together quicker and more efficiently for you. The single point of activation also, as I mentioned, it's a quick way to activate an alert, and therefore it saves time. I recall an incident back in the early 80s where we had to do a comprehensive recall of more than 12,000 people, and it took every bit of 72 hours to complete that event. It was very painful. I flash forward to 1990 at the start of the Gulf War, and we were able to activate an alert, a small-scale alert, not 12,000 people, in 38 minutes, and we were high-fiving each other because we thought we were so efficient. Flash forward to 2018, and you have the ability to activate multiple modalities with the push of a single button. It's quite a change. So the single point of activation is really the true Alertus system difference, and our ability to integrate with virtually any technology, whether it be analog or digital, is definitely a game changer. I will tell you, and I will caveat that statement by saying that there are still some proprietary technologies out there where a little bit deeper exploration and collaboration with that proprietary system owner is required to achieve the integration effect. But I always, when I'm out consulting with customers, whether they're new to the emergency notification journey or just in the next phase of their journey, I always like to encourage them to never take a thought for integration off the table until you allow us the opportunity to explore that opportunity or that integration pathway with you. And ultimately, we help you fill the gaps by targeting your entire infrastructure. So on to my favorite part. Again, this is the two-way radio integration, and what you see depicted up on the screen, obviously, is a hand-portable radio. I do like to, my passion is making sure, just based on my Air Force experience, making sure that also aircraft and other modes of transportation in the area receive the alert. And sometimes they have a different form factor for radio communications. But radio communication is radio communication, and whether it is communicating with a bus, a truck, a person with a handheld radio, a plane, a submarine. If the radio technology exists to enable that communication, in all likelihood, we can integrate with it. The strengths of this type of integration, obviously, it automates the notification over the radio so that you don't have to worry about, did I get to the radio or not? We do have the ability to, based upon your use case, target individual channels. I've worked with many customers to where, especially in higher education, where land mobile radios are very prolific. I'll see folks in facilities, folks in human resources, public safety, medical, whatever it might be. They're all carrying handheld radios, but they're on different channels. And sometimes you might have a use case to where you really and truly want to target a specific channel in a given alert, and we can definitely help you. I would tell you that probably 9 out of every 10 integrations that we have done with the two-way radio systems, customers opt to integrate with an all-call channel that exists on their current radio infrastructure. And it's, as I mentioned, we have the ability to integrate with both digital and analog systems. Frequency typically is not a challenge, so whether it's EF, LF, UHF, VHF, FM, whatever radio technologies you're currently using, we more than likely can help you identify the technologies to put in place to make it happen. I'd be very remiss if I didn't mention how we make this integration happen, and that is through our text-to-speech module. So what happens is when you activate an alert, the alert beacon, if you're targeting your two-way radio integration, the alert beacon will receive the alert on its next polling cycle. It will activate the text-to-speech module. The text-to-speech module will activate its integration with the radio system and then transmit the alert and then release the frequency. And I'll discuss a little bit more of that on the next slide. But it's very efficient and very cost and time effective. Some of the supported brands, I would say Motorola probably is the most prevalent integration that we see, but we have integrated with Kenwood, Harris, and others as well. So what we're really doing here, we aren't really bringing in any new radio technologies for you. We're seeking to leverage your existing radio infrastructure. It definitely helps you streamline the emergency notification process, and it ensures that the radios are touched, recognizing that they typically are touch points that are highlighted in crisis communications plans. It is virtually instantaneous without a doubt using that text-to-speech module. The typical use case that we see really speaks toward the playback of alert tones followed by the rendered speech alert. And what I mean by that is when the text-to-speech engages the push-to-talk functionality, which triggers the channel that it's set to communicate over on your radio system, what most customers opt to do is play a 3 to 5 second alerting tone. And that alerting tone serves the purpose solely of capturing the attention of the individuals carrying the radios. There's a slight pause following the tone, and then the rendered speech alert is spoken over the channel. Most customers repeat that cycle 2 times, and then the channel is released back to operations. One of the biggest benefits that I have seen personally, and just based on time in crisis communication structures and experience working crises, is the even rate of speech, volume, pitch, tone, articulation that we receive through the text-to-speech module. Recognizing that we are all humans, and I am definitely amongst that list. Oftentimes what happens is when a crisis event kicks off and that initial notification comes into whatever type of operation center you have or focal point for the start of your emergency response process, oftentimes that will happen to us as human beings is just a simple physiological response, the release of adrenaline. And when that happens, we tend to speak faster. The pitch of our voice tends to escalate. Our volume sometimes goes up. Sometimes we in doing so, we do not clearly articulate the alert. So in applying this type of technology into that process, you're somewhat mitigating that understandable human effect that can occur in a voice, in a live voice spoken alert over these types of technologies. So getting back to the single point of activation, the bringing your radio system into it, if you look at the graphic, that kind of says it all. So instead of having to leapfrog from one system to the other, picking up your fire panel annunciator so that you can speak over those speakers that are deployed throughout your facility, getting on the radio system or the giant voice system to make sure that your outdoor notification is in, individually typing in a desktop notification or an email alert, accessing the web application for your personal notification system, and trying to get through all those activities, maintain situational awareness, and stay in touch with the next steps in the response. By having that single point of activation, you're truly helping to optimize the crisis communications process and ensure that everybody has the opportunity to consume the alert notification within your organization, and more importantly, has the opportunity to take protective actions to save lives and protect property, which ultimately, at the end of the day, those of us that support these types of emergency management functionalities, we are seeking to reduce the loss of life, hopefully prevent loss of life altogether, and limit impacts to personal, corporate property, as well as our environment. We always like to kind of close it out with a use case type graphic, and what you see depicted up on the screen is just a notional campus type deployment where we have multiple facility types, multiple facilities that are somewhat geographically separated from one another. People could be moving from one facility to the other, and all the various modalities, communications modalities that you likely have in place or could put in place very quickly to facilitate your crisis communications. And again, having that single point of activation through the Alertus notification system is one way in which you can recapture some of that time that would be lost by individually activating each of these communications modalities separate of one another. Just to provide you with a little bit of information on additional resources before we turn it back over to Charisse for some questions. I'd like to point out the third bullet down. If you're interested in upcoming webinars that Alertus is hosting, as well as events in the fourth bullet down. Those two URLs might be of use to you. And if you're calling in from the educational sector and you're not fully familiar with Alertus or not yet using Alertus, I would definitely encourage you to check out the desktop notification program that we have in place to support our education partners. And finally, we have a listing of just some of the mass notification codes and mandates with which Alertus complies. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Cherise.
Thank you, Ben. We are now beginning the Q&A session of our presentation. If you have a question, please submit them through the chat or question box. Please note if we do not get to your question during this session, a representative will reach out to answer your question directly. A recording of this webinar will also be shared with you after today's presentation. Now let's begin with our first question. Is it a complex process to qualify whether Alertus can successfully integrate with our two-way radio system?
Typically not. And I was talking with Cherise a little bit about this before we started the webinar. In my experience over the past 4 years since we introduced this integration, what will typically happen is one of our sales representatives will be talking with an existing or prospective client, and the question will come up, hey, I'd like to integrate with our two-way radio system. How do we go about doing it? At that point, the sales rep will either bring myself or Joe Tuck, who's our senior sales engineer, into the conversation. And what we typically do is we like to discuss with you the use case that you envision for the integration. How would you like it to behave? Are you looking to specifically target one channel at a time, or are you looking to just disseminate the alert over an all-call channel? And after we have an opportunity to get that use case in our mind and kind of conceptually qualify the integration opportunity, we would provide you all with a questionnaire that is, it really gets into the meat and potatoes and of the architecture of your radio system. We request information on base stations as well as the handheld or the portable two-way radios that are being utilized within your organization, the frequency type and frequencies that are being used for communication. We also need to understand whether the system is trunked, whether it's a capacity plus type system. There are a lot of different variables that we ask you to research for us, and usually your radio shop or your radio system service provider will be able to very quickly fill out that questionnaire. Once we get that questionnaire back, that's when we sit down with the engineers to make sure that we know exactly what type of approach we need to take for the integration. And at that point, we'll get back together with you. If we have any additional questions for your radio service provider, we'll ask either that you facilitate that exchange of information, or perhaps put us together on a phone call so that we can talk about things. But it's not necessarily a complex process. Usually takes about 48 hours, just to walk through all the various steps to get things done.
Thank you. We have two radio systems which are not interconnected. Is it possible to integrate with both? If so, can we then specify whether we want Alertus to activate one, the other, or both?
Yeah, so what we're talking about here are two non-unified radio systems, and we most certainly could integrate with each of them. It would be an integration specific to each radio system. So you would have a set of alerting endpoints connected to radio system 1 and a set of alerting endpoints connected to radio system 2. And what that does, obviously, it facilitates the integration, but at the same time, it builds in a lot of flexibility because it provides you with the capability of determining whether, if you have an alert situation where you only need to activate radio system 1, we can do so without activating radio system 2, and likewise for radio system 2. Or if you need to touch both of them at the same time, you can do so through the integration by targeting, both of those integration pathways. And they will activate, uniquely, or I should say in their own right, in association with their alert beacon that's associated with that integration.
Thank you. From a hardware perspective, what is required to put the integration in place?
Okay, this is a question where the answer is a little bit unique because it's one of those where it truly depends upon the architecture that you have in place. The minimum hardware that would come on site and be joined to your Alertus notification system would be an alert beacon with a text-to-speech module. In some instances, we have the ability to directly connect the audio output and the dry contact closure to the radio system. And usually the way that occurs, if we're looking at a base station, most of your base stations have got what they call an accessory plug on the back. And the accessory plugs are typically anywhere from 26 to, I've seen them as large as 55 pins. And each of those pins represents some sort of function within the radio system. So what we would do in that particular instance, if you already have availability on that accessory connector, is we would work with your radio service provider to identify the pins where we would land the line level audio input as well as the dry contact closure. And if you're not familiar with the terminology of dry contact closure, it's basically a relay. So in radio speak, what we're doing by connecting the contact closure on the text-to-speech module to a receptor point on the radio system is activating that push-to-talk. So the behavior, you'll have the alert beacon and a text-to-speech module minimum, and then a connection either to a radio accessory if we need to bring one in, or directly to an accessory connector on your radio system. But you will know when we qualify the integration opportunity with you, you will know exactly what we need. And typically at the outset of the discussion, we'll start out by saying, we know which alert, or we know that we're bringing in an alert beacon and text-to-speech, and we know which radio interface component we're going to introduce, and then we will ask at that point, is there an opportunity or is there availability to integrate with an existing component on your site? If there is, that's great. We remove that interface component. If there is not, then we simply introduce that third piece of hardware. But relatively small form factor and footprint, if you will. And one of the wonderful things about this integration, if you already do not, or if you currently don't have an alert beacon within whatever serves as your operations center or the area where incident information comes into, you can actually use that alert beacon as an alerting appliance within that work center. And what it does help do is it helps confirm if they're not able to monitor the radio as things are going off. When that alert beacon activates, it helps them confirm that, yes, indeed, we're engaging the radio system at the same time.
I have a question here about which models of Motorola radios that Alertus supports.
Actually, pretty much all of them, whether they be analog or digital. In the era of P25 that's emerged in the wake of 9/11, we find ourselves integrating with Astro radios today in Motorola. But we have an awful lot of capability to reach back to the legacy infrastructure that Motorola had in place prior to P25. So, but the best way to qualify that would be to collect the specific information. And if you would like to, if you'd like to forward that over to me, please, my email is up on the screen. I'd be happy to do a real quick qualification for you if you'd like to send that my way.
Thank you. Assuming Alertus is integrated with another personal notification system, does Alertus trigger the personal alert, or does the personal alert system trigger Alertus?
One of my favorites. And again, this really gets back to one of the strengths that I've seen. Back in when I was still in the Air Force and overseeing mass notification, the biggest challenge that we had was getting two vendors to talk to one another, be in the same room with one another, and definitely integrate with one another. In our era today, the paradigm has shifted, and integration is the key to supporting the customer, and that's being recognized within the industry. So when we are integrated with one of our third-party partners that's facilitating the personal notification side, especially if it's one of those where we already enjoy a two-way integration, whereby you can activate either through the personal notification web console or the Alertus console you will still enjoy that functionality. Because what you'll see is if you prefer to activate through the personal notification system, it will activate Alertus via the API call. And so long as the radio integration is included in whatever is being activated through that third-party system, your two-way radio will activate. And then likewise, similarly, okay, I won't even try that a third time. If you're using the Alertus console to activate, obviously you'll be touching your Alertus endpoints and you'll be leveraging the third-party capability via our API integration with those partners. So great question, but again, it's really dependent upon your use case, and you have the optimal level of flexibility given the two-way integrations that exist today.
Okay. Does the Alertus integration facilitate two-way communication?
No, ma'am. That is the one thing that we currently do not do, and there's a reason for that. With regard to the two-way radio integration, the integration is envisioned solely to publish the alert over the radio and then release that frequency so that live person communications can happen in the manner that they are intended. So once the alert notification has terminated and the frequency is released, if somebody on the distant end engages over that channel for communication, to ask clarification, to expand upon, what they're observing in relation to the incident, whatever that might be, that radio call will be going to, and I'll use the term generically, whoever is serving as your dispatcher at that particular time. But the Alertus system, once it is done with transmitting that initial alert over the radio system, it disengages and gets out of the way so that true response and recovery can occur between the folks that it needs to.
Thank you very much. We have now concluded our Q&A session of our presentation. If you have any questions or need additional information, please feel free to email marketing@alertus.com, and we will be happy to assist. If you are looking for more information on Alertus and our solutions, visit our website, www.alertus.com. If you're interested in upcoming webinars, please visit www.alertus.com/webinars to see the full schedule. Thank you for joining today's webinar, and we look forward to meeting you again soon.